So let's read Ephesians chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. That's kind of where we were, and we'll start there and get going into our little topical study today. Volunteer.
Got New King James Version. And you he made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in sons of disobedience.
Okay, so prince of the power of the air is one name for one reference to the devil, just like Jesus and the Holy Spirit and God have tons of different names that are used to reference them in the Bible. You know, this is one of many for Satan. The Greek, we'll go over our Greek words today. There's two in the New Testament and only one in the Old Testament that is the name of Satan. So this is Satanas. So obviously it's just, we've just taken that word and we use it as the same. Satanas means the adversary accuser. It's a specific name for Satan, the one we know of. Adversary, accuser. And the vehement accuser. What does vehement mean?
Strong.
Yeah, like strongly accusing, accuser. And just Satan. Just like the word we use for baptism, same thing here. We've just taken the Greek word and just pulled it into English. Then, can anyone recognize this word just from how it looks?
Diabolo.
No? Diabolos. So that has a few meanings. A slanderer.
Cole would have got it if he was here.
Yeah, I know he would. I trust he would.
You can let him know that.
Or also, they said in the definition Satan, but it's always translated specifically devil. So whenever you see this word, Satanas, they translate it Satan. Diabolos is translated devil. They'll use this word for like demons sometimes. So you have to kind of use the context there to know which one. Any of them that are even slightly questionable, I'm not going to touch today. Any of them that are even slightly, which one could it be talking about? Not going to touch them today. That, again, is another conversation. So we're going to go on a trip through the Bible and look at all kinds of different times Satan is talked about. Oh, actually, there's one other word that I didn't write up here because I looked at the Hebrew version of Satan, and again, it's just Satan. That's how you pronounce it. It's just Satan in Hebrew, and there's all kinds of. I'm not practiced at Hebrew, so I just didn't even try. But so there's one word for Satan in the Old Testament, and it's just the word Satan, and it's same guy, the adversary accuser. So we already see the one in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2, the prince of the power of the air. But I wanted to look at verses that tell us who he is, like what he's about, some aspects of him that we can know. For instance, there's not a verse in the Bible that says he has horns and a pointy tail. We don't have that verse in the Bible. But we do have lots of other verses that describe him. So let's start with something. I've got some New Testament, I've got some Old Testament. So let's go New Testament, John chapter 8, verse 38 through 46. Some of these passages I've chosen are longer passages. It's good to have the full context with these, the full story. So John chapter 8, verses 38 through 46. And whoever gets there can read it.
I speak that which I have seen with my Father, and ye do that which ye have seen with your father. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Jesus saith unto them, If ye were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. But now ye seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. Ye do the deeds of your father. Then said they to him, We be not born of fornication. We have one Father, even God. Jesus said unto them, If God were your Father, ye would love me, for I proceeded forth and came from God. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do ye not understand my speech? Even because ye cannot hear my word. Ye are of your father, the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, you believe me not. Which of you convinceth me of sin? And if I say the truth, why do you not believe me?
So, I like this passage because Jesus is telling us it's really clear about who. It gives us a good timeline of how Satan is a murderer and a liar and the father of liars. It also kind of connects to this Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2, talking about the sons of disobedience. We can be children of Satan in a similar way that we can be sons and daughters of the living God. If we do the Father's will, that is what we are. So if we do God the Father's will, then we are his children. And if we do Satan, the father of lies, will, then we are sons of his. That is a way that the Bible presents him. So he's a liar and a murderer. Does anyone know why he would maybe be said a murderer here? We'll get to some more verses that might enlighten it, but just off the cuff, anyone know?
Cain and Abel.
Yeah, Cain and Abel, temptation to sin there. Could be.
I think the fact that he had Adam and Eve, disobey God, and God said, the day you do it, you shall surely die. Satan was the, instrument.
Yeah, you won't die.
Yeah, and he brought death to all man through that, basically.
So in that exact sense, and we're going to be reading that kind of verse next, he's the father of death, of murder as well. He was the first one to lead someone to their death. So terrible, not a stand-up individual. So let's go to the next one. Let's go to Old Testament, Genesis chapter 3, verses 13 through 15.
The Lord God said to the woman, What is this that you have done? The woman said, The serpent deceived me, and I ate. So the Lord God said to the serpent, Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel.
So we know this to be the devil. We know this to be Satan, the serpent. So there's plenty of times in the Bible where the serpent is a reference to the devil, to Satan. And this is it. This is the story of the first lie and murder in the Bible. So kind of directly tied to that passage that Jesus tells us who he is. So yeah, we see him being described as a serpent, and actually maybe even being a kind of serpent there in the garden. Okay, next up, he's also the accuser. So as you may have already know, there's a bunch of stuff in Job about him. So let's go to Job chapter 1. Job chapter 1, verses 8 through 11.
And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect, upright man, one that feareth God, and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God not? Hath not he made a hedge around him, and about his house, and about all that he hath on every side. Thou hast blessed the works of his hands, and substance increased in the land. How far do you want to go?
11.
But put forth thy hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face.
So we know that by definition, Satan is the accuser, and you've probably heard him being described that way a lot. Here's a good example of him accusing. Hey, have you seen my servant Job? He's great. Well, I bet he wouldn't be. I bet if you just took everything away from him, I bet he wouldn't be. He's accusing Job of being like superficial, like, oh, he's only faithful to you because you gave him stuff. So he's in the presence of God accusing. Accuser. In the same passage, we see kind of another trait that we see commonly throughout the Bible that describes who Satan is, what he's about. So let's, same chapter, verse 6 and 7. Volunteer, I know you're all there.
Now there was a day when the Son of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said, Satan, where hence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it.
So we're going to turn to Revelation next and look at another example of this. But it seems as though Satan is able to be on earth. This is a weird angle for this pen, apparently. On earth. He's able to, we're going to get to the roaring lion passage, but there's another passage in Revelation that kind of backs up this idea that he's here, he's on earth. So Revelation chapter 12. And usually I don't like to use Revelation because so much of it you can say, oh, well, that's a metaphor. But I think this one does stand. Also, there could be an argument that maybe, like, Christ defeated Satan on the cross, and so maybe after his sacrifice, maybe Satan isn't here anymore. There's a lot of people who think that Satan is already in hell, and so looking at this passage, we're going to see what it says. Revelation chapter 12. Let's read verse 5, and then we're going to read verses 9 through 13. So verse 5 says, she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne. So to remind you about this prophecy, this is Jesus here. So Jesus being born to Mary, he's got the rod of iron, which is the fact that he's, rules the kingdom. He's the head of the church. And then when he dies, he raises again and then goes to heaven. Okay, so that's kind of the context of what is being talked about in this specific part of the prophecy. And then let's read verses 9 through 13, if I could get a volunteer.
So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now salvation and strength in the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's it.
A couple more verses.
Sorry. Yeah, 13. Yeah.
All right. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants from the earth and the sea, for the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. Okay, so this actually kind of wraps together, or maybe it references everything we've talked about so far. He's the accuser, it says in verse, the deceiver of the whole world, there in verse 9. It calls him both the devil and Satan, uses both of these Greek words to reference him. It talks, the dragon, that great serpent. So we talked about the serpent. And talks about how he has been thrown down to heaven. He's super mad about it.
and he's persecuting the woman. Does anyone know who the woman there is? Yeah, the church. And so he's been cast to the earth. He's walking around. It doesn't tell us that he's in some kind of a form. He doesn't say, oh, you might meet him on the street. It doesn't say any other descriptor other than that he is here, in a sense. And so I think any kind of, trying to nail down exactly what that means is just us trying to talk about what we feel, what we think, what our imagination tells us. The Bible doesn't actually say he is, you'll know him by his horns and his pointy tail, and he always carries a pitchfork and he's red. Like, the Bible doesn't describe him in any amount of detail whatsoever. It's just that he is here and he is persecuting the church. And we know that to be true. He's our adversary. So let's move to, does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns up to this point? We're going to be turning to 1 Peter next. 1 Peter chapter 5. So this is a verse that I've kind of referenced a couple times, and I'm sure most of us probably think of really, really early in the conversation whenever we're talking about the devil. So 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 8 and 9.
Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking whom he may devour, whom resist steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in you, brethren, and your brethren that are in the world.
So he is walking around like a roaring lion, hungry for who he can devour. He is seeking those who he can influence, seeking those who he can throw off the path, throw off the way. So he's hunting. He's like a roaring lion. Roaring lion. So it's interesting that he's a roaring lion. He's loud? I don't know what that metaphor might mean. Why not just say he's a hungry lion? Or say that he's, a lot of times, like in the Old Testament, it talks about young lions, who have a lot of energy. But here he's described as a roaring lion. That's kind of interesting. I wonder if that's...
Do you know why lions roar? Is it typically to show their dominance over their area, or?
Yeah, like territory maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something interesting to think about.
I think it certainly conveys a lack of fear, right? If you're not going to announce your arrival or your presence if there's any reservation about your stability in the situation, and lions being kind of the top of the food chain.
Right.
They don't have to worry about, little animals coming after them.
Yeah, and we talked already. The very first thing we said was that he's, in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 2, he's the prince of the power of the air. So he has, that's kind of what led me to say last time that we're going to talk about his powers, is because he's got these authorities that he has. But we know that it's ultimately God who has all the authority. So I decided to change it to his influence over us. But yeah, so he's a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And I wanted to read verse 9 there because we can resist him. And we'll be talking about that here in just a second. Although he is a lion, we have our God behind us. So before we get there, though, let's go to Matthew chapter 13. There's another interesting description of him that I kind of hadn't thought of. This is one of the parables that kind of doesn't really get talked about as much as some of the other parables, I feel. Even though it's one of the ones that Jesus describes. He explains exactly what everything in the parable means for us. So Matthew chapter 13, verses 36 through 43.
But Jesus sent the multitude away, and went into the house, and his disciples came unto him, saying, Declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. He answered and said unto them, He that soweth the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. But the tares are the children of the wicked one. The enemy that soweth them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels.
43.
As therefore the tares are gathered and burned into the fire, so shall it be in the end of the world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth in the sun in the kingdom of their fathers. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear.
Okay, so the weeds or the tares are the sons of the evil one. So we've kind of already talked about this a couple times, where sons of disobedience and sons of the father of lies. Here, sons of the evil one. The enemy who sowed them is the devil. So just as the tares are gathered and burned with fire, so will be at the end of the age. So, the one who is sowing the tares in this parable is the enemy, the devil. So does anyone remember this parable and kind of what we think the tares represent? Like who they are in our lives?
I think they're people that cause division in the church. I know this one church that Tim was at, we were there, and there were 28 baptisms, everything was going great, and then this man moved in and his family, and just little by little, things kept changing, and it drove Tim crazy, going to the elders and saying, just doing these little things that just aren't quite right. Then he started taking people and meeting in their homes and like pulling people aside, and we ended up moving, and when we moved, they left. And so, but that's what was happening, because good things were happening at that church, and everybody was growing, and then that one person came in to cause strife amongst people, and they're splitting all the people, and it was awful. And I remember saying, it probably wasn't a good thing to say, but I said, I know exactly where the devil's sitting in our church, because it was just really bad.
Yeah, I think we speak this way a lot, where the devil is not worried about those who are already lost. He is trying to throw off track those who are in the kingdom. What better way to throw off the most people possible than to throw in some weeds, throw in some, a tare is it looks like grain until it's fully matured. It looks exactly like wheat, all up until it's fully matured. And then you can tell that it's a different plant. It's actually toxic. Humans can't eat it. If they eat it, they get sick, they get poisoned. And so to scatter tares amongst the people that looks like a Christian and talks like a Christian and says they're a Christian, and then it's not until they bear fruit that they are shown for what they really were, that is a really powerful tool that I think the Bible is, and specifically Christ here, is telling us that the devil uses to mess with us.
I think about the situation there in Matthew 16 where, Jesus asked his disciples, "Who do men say I am?" And Peter made that great confession of faith. Just a little bit later in that chapter, Jesus talks about his death, and Peter kind of rebukes him for talking about his death. You remember what Jesus said to Peter there? "Get behind me, Satan." Calls him Satan. You think about that situation. We need to be careful in the church. Faithful members, that we are not doing exactly, what Tammy was talking about, that we're not dividing the church, that we're not, doing things that's causing divisions, because we can be in that same situation, that Peter was, where Jesus is saying, you need to repent. You need to stop doing these things. We need to be on guard ourselves for that same situation.
Yeah, exactly. Any other thoughts? Very good thoughts. Okay, there's a kind of one more, there's two more things that we're going to talk about Satan real quick. Staying in Matthew 25, and I've alluded to this already. I hope you guys are seeing that in all of these verses about Satan, almost always there's like a couple of these traits that are kind of shown in the verse, and that's just, it's good to know that there's no confusion about who the enemy is. All of his traits are always consistent. We know, we can identify the enemy. Okay, so Matthew 25, verse 41.
Then shall he say also unto them on the left hand, Depart from me, ye cursed, into everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels.
So Satan is who hell is prepared for. Prepared. So we saw that in this last verse. We were looking at how the sons of the evil one are going to be cast into the fire. If that's where the sons are going, that's where the Father is going too. Just like how we can't wait to go to heaven where our Father is, that's where the sons of disobedience are going and their Father. Here it says, the eternal fire is prepared for the devil and his angels. Combined with how that's said and how, we looked at how he was on earth to tempt and to bother the church, to try to lead them astray. The devil doesn't seem to be in hell yet. It is prepared for him, just like heaven is prepared for us one day. After the judgment, when each is judged, either in this story, he was talking about the left and the right, the goats and the sheep. And after they are judged, then they will be cast into whichever place that they have been judged. So hell is prepared for Satan. And here's the last thing. We've actually got 3 verses talking about this. So let me get volunteers for each of these. Raise your hands if you'll read them. James chapter 4, verse 7. We'll get John. 2 Timothy 2, 24 through 26. And Ephesians 6, 10 through 12. Okay. James 4, 7.
Submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you.
2 Timothy 2, 24 through 26.
And a servant of the Lord must not quarrel, but be gentle to all, able to teach, patient, in humility correcting those who are in opposition. If perhaps God will grant them repentance, so that they may know the truth, and they may come to their senses and escape the snare of the devil, having been taken captive by him to do his will.
Able to escape the snare. Okay, Ephesians 6, 10 through 12.
Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of the world, against the spiritual wickedness in his high places.
Okay, so the whole armor of the Lord allows us to resist him. So, over and over and over again, and those are just a selection. Those are just a short selection of all the verses that talk about how we are able to resist him. Although he has the ability to influence us, we can always stand against him with the power of God. If we stand on our own, 50-50, or maybe less, maybe 20-80, with God, we are absolutely able to resist the devil. Even though he is a roaring lion, he is the father of murderers and liars, the serpent, the accuser. Although he has all this influence over kind of the spiritual war that we're at, he is able to be resisted. So, questions, comments, concerns, and then we're going to move on into the next idea. We have 13 minutes to talk about that. But it's okay, we'll go quick because it's kind of the same ones we went through last time. So I decided to also reorder the influences that he has over us. I start out with kingdoms, and because the Bible has a couple of different things to say about how kingdoms are looked at in the spiritual plane. Maybe that was the toughest thing to talk about. And then I went into illnesses, which is another one which is maybe has some different thoughts about it. So we're going to start this way. We know that Satan has influence over people. Obviously, that's how temptation works. People are tempted. So we got a bunch of different verses for this. And let's get some different people who are willing to read. Okay, so I'm gonna look for different people to read. Acts chapter 26, verse 18. I can get a volunteer for that.
Acts 26:18.
Yep. 2 Corinthians 4:4. Jonathan. Revelation 13:12.
I'll take it.
Okay. Revelation 13:12. And then Luke 8:12. Share. Okay, Acts 26:18.
To open their eyes in order to turn them from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sin and an inheritance among those who are sanctified by the faith.
People, when they're not under God, they are under the power of Satan. Again, people he influences. 2 Corinthians 4:4.
Whose minds the God of this age has blinded, who do not believe, lest the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine on them.
People have been blinded to the power of God, and so obviously if they're not sons of God, then they're sons of disobedience. Revelation 13:12.
It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed.
So again, authority to influence people to worship the wrong stuff. And then Luke 8:12.
Those by the wayside are they that hear. Then cometh the devil and taketh away the word out of their hearts, lest they should believe and be saved. So
it's obviously true that we have free will. We can choose how we respond to things. But we see over and over again in the Bible, and actually there's one I didn't put here, but I don't know why I didn't write it down. But in John, it says that when Judas went to go betray Jesus, they're at the Last Supper, and it says that Satan came into Judas's heart, and that's when he fully decided to go through with it, and he got up and left to go get with the Pharisees. So there's a kind of direct influence that Satan has over us, not just. We have our own temptations, and each of us are different with the things that are going to tempt us. But Satan, it seems, puts those things in our way. He tries to ensure that we are going to fall and tries to mess us up more in those ways. The next thing that Satan seems to have some kind of power over is these kingdoms. And we talked about how in Luke chapter 4, verse 5 through 8, Jesus was tempted with all the kingdoms of the world. We talked about how that is kind of, the real temptation was Satan giving Jesus a shortcut to being the king. And we already know that through his resurrection, he became the head of the church, which is his kingdom, which then spread over the whole world. And Satan was offering a shortcut of sorts. But let's look at another example where Satan has influenced a kingdom for his will. So 1 Chronicles 21, 1 through 2. By the way, it makes sense that if Satan can influence people, kingdoms are made up of people. So if he can get to the leader of a nation, and they start, instead of following God's will, they start doing really corrupted things. They start lying and murdering. The Nazis are kind of an obvious example to me of a really off-track nation who are not doing God's will. Although we could say that ultimately God's will is always done, no matter what choices an individual or even a whole nation makes. God's will be done, and we are going to talk about that. Here's a specific example of 1 Chronicles chapter 21, verse 1 through 2. If someone could read that.
Now Satan stood up against Israel, moved David to number Israel. So David said to Joab, and to the leaders of the people, go number Israel from Beersheba to Dan, and bring the number from them to me, that I may know it.
So through his influence over people, even someone who is said to be a friend of God like David was moved, it says, because Satan stood up against him, whatever that means, to do a wrong thing for a kingdom. And then God punished them for doing that. God punished that whole kingdom for this census that was taken. And so, that's one specific example of how a whole kingdom can fall under the sway of Satan through his influence. I do want to talk real quick about how God is sovereign, because there's plenty of verses that we can look at with that. So we're going to read through those verses. If someone could read Daniel chapter 4, verse 17.
This decision is by the decree of watchers, and the sentence by word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, gives it to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. So
that's one example of a situation where God has influence over the kingdoms. They will ultimately do his will. He can set over a kingdom whoever he wants. And he will do that, including the lowest of men. Romans chapter 13, verse 1. You guys are getting really good at flipping through the Bible this morning. And that's good. That's great.
Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God.
Yeah, so here we have an Old Testament and a New Testament example of the fact that God has authority, God has sovereignty over the movement of nations, the actions of nations. And we can also admit that individuals surrender their will to Satan. We can surrender our will to God, or we can surrender our will to Satan. And when people come into power over a nation, that's the choice that they have to make. And God will ultimately have his will done, but we know that Satan does his best to also influence them. So, we also looked at illnesses, and we looked at illnesses. We looked at Luke 13:16. Let's read that again and remember what that was about. Yes, and ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath day? So Jesus there says that Satan was the one who bound this woman in her infirmity. We also looked at 2 Corinthians 12:7, which was the thorn in the flesh, Paul's thorn in the flesh, and it says that there was a messenger of Satan who gave that to them. So that's kind of weird, but that could go either way. But then an obvious one that we didn't look at is Job. Job chapter 2, verse 7. Job 2:7. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. So yeah, we see multiple times throughout the Bible that Satan uses illness to impact the faith, again, of an individual. So kind of both of these things are connected to this. How many times have people gotten sick and maybe it's incurable? Maybe they've been told they have X number of days left, and they have to make a choice. They choose either, okay, I need to get baptized, or they say, oh, there must not be a God, because how would a loving God let this happen to me? We see that all the time. Just like Satan using tares as a tool to tear apart the church, he can use illnesses to tear apart the faith of an individual who maybe was on the fence or had their doubts, didn't have the support they needed to get through a situation. And we see that heavily with Job. That whole book is dedicated to his struggle with these things that Satan specifically gave him. And finally, wow, we're going to get through this whole topic on time. I'm so surprised. Okay, and then finally, the power over death. Or you could say influence using death. Let's turn to Hebrews chapter 2, verses 14 through 16. Galatians and Ephesians. Okay, Hebrews 2, verses 14 through 16. Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things. We're talking about Christ here. That through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery. For surely it is not angels that he helps, but he helps the offspring of Abraham. So kind of bringing it back around to, we were talking about the passage where he talks about murder, Satan being the father of murderers and liars, accusing the Pharisees of being such. And they said, oh, we're children of Abraham. Well, if you were children of Abraham, then God would have been helping you. But as it is, you've been working under the will of Satan. The power of death, the fear of death, again, is a huge influence that Satan has. And ultimately, it's his final victory. If he can get people through these other methods to not follow the will of God in their lives, ultimately death is what will permanently separate them, permanently stop them from having that opportunity to repent, to seek Christ, to be in him, and to obtain forgiveness of their sins, and to ultimately be with God. Death is his way of cutting their opportunities short. Thoughts?
Well, I'm not so sure I agree with the illness aspect that you're saying in our age, certain illnesses or that the devil is affecting us through illnesses, heart attacks, heart disease, accidents in cars. What are we talking about, Joe?
So we're talking about the influence that the different ways that Satan influences us to fall under his will instead of finding God. And like what I said before, when we find ourselves with an illness, people have to make a choice.
I wouldn't say that the devil has done this. I would say that those things happen in our world through life, and therefore
How
people react to it is the thing. I think they go into a slippery slope there with that one, because that really would influence critics of what's them to say, I got heart disease from a young child. What's them? That's a problem for me, So I like what you said about the others, but that one I would be a little careful on. That one, I'm not so sure about.
Well, I think he clarified to say the people's response to it. Sometimes people draw closer to God, and sometimes people are like, whoa, like if this is happening to me, there's no way that could be a...
Yeah, and I think that's how we should look at it, is that when things happen, including you could say, in that respect, you could say, well, I lost my job because of the devil, and now how do I react to that? So there's a lot of things we can put on there. And I think that's how we look at it, is the response to a situation that is maybe not even related to the devil, but just the world that we're in. We eat certain things and we get heart disease. We drive poorly and we get into a car accident.
Right.
And based on DNA, we just maybe
predisposed
to something,
Yeah, and so all I'm doing is, in the Bible it shows us like 3 different situations where it says that Satan caused illness. And so, I don't know, it's just something to consider. And so then we have to decide how we want to think about, between Satan giving Job all these, boils and illnesses and stuff, Jesus saying that Satan put the lady under the blood, the issue of blood, and then Paul saying that a messenger of Satan gave him his thorn in the flesh. We just have to know how to think about it, because it's in the Bible, and we believe the Bible, and we just have to know how to wrangle with those situations. Okay. Thank you.